puppy as well as me. So I've got, that's a Phantom, and that is probably the most modern one that I've flown other than when I became a test pilot. So I'll go through stuff and talk a bit about where, let's see if we can get it to make it work. Oh, there we go. I had a wonderful career in the Navy, and I'll just very basically, I came up through the ranks. I spent 8 years, almost 8 years as an enlisted man, and then became an officer after they sent me to college as an enlisted man on active duty, and then became a pilot because I thought I really fancied becoming a pilot in the Navy because I'd worked on carriers, because when I was enlisted, I was an aviation electronics technician. And so I was always up on the flight deck, seeing the guys coming and going, and thought, what a wonderful thing to do. Little background, I spent basically 2.5 years flying with 892 Squadron, the Royal Navy. And the reason for that is that they had just started with the Phantom. And I had a lot of Phantom time in the combat, and of course I'd also been through Top Gun, because I was in the very first Top Gun class, and I'll talk a bit about Top Gun here in a minute. Top Gun was a very important program that they started, and I'll go into that just a wee bit too. This is basically what I'm going to do. Talk a little bit about carrier aviation, a little bit about British carrier aviation. I'll do a little bit after Top Gun, talk a little bit about the movies, and then I'll talk about Iran. Now, the one thing I will say is that what I'm allowed to say about Iran, I have to be very careful of. And the reason for that is my clearance. If you have a clearance and you can't tell anybody how high that is, and it goes on your entire life until you pass away, and then it disappears. And so you're always responsible. But there's lots of things that we've done in the past that go on today. And so I'm hoping that when I talk to you about it, that my accuracy is spot on and is not dated back when I started flying airplanes in the 70s. So here we go. And at the end, we can do questions and answers. Once we talk a little bit about the, Iran, you can ask me questions then and I'll answer what I can. A little bit about aircraft carrier types. The interesting thing, if you look at the list, basically more than anything, they were designed for specific purposes and types of airplanes. So if you see one that says for helicopters, it was for helicopters. For submarines, we ended up with submarines having the capability to launch an airplane that was basically a sea airplane, land, and they could load it back into onto the submarine, close the doors, and go back under the water. So it was very interesting. So lots of different things. The names, U.S. Navy is pretty much named for famous places and people. I'm hoping that we don't have one that has starts with a T. But anyway, that's part of a different story as well. So here's the countries that have aircraft carriers. The interesting thing here is I just wanted to point this out. This is China right here. China has got a brand new carrier. They use it for launching with a catapult. And they also use it for vertical lift and takeoff. And so they've got that. So they've got a big one. Just first mentioned in the Navy, and it went on. And the proper first U.S. Navy was the Langley, and that goes into 22. British early, the first one was the Empire Factory. That's a German. If you look at the German lower right-hand side, that looks like a modern carrier, and they were very good. the thing is it never really got into the war during the Second World War. They put my keys from my car there. I don't accidentally start it. Post-Korea, the single biggest thing, the carriers get bigger and bigger and bigger and fewer of them because it costs so much. You're talking about $3 billion, $4 billion to build an aircraft carrier, and it takes a good 4 to 5 years to build a puppy. And then there's at least the modern airplanes, and this was in the newspaper, at least 100 airplanes on the modern carriers. And that would be today. The defensive systems is quite interesting on the carriers because they've gotten better and better and better and better. And they've got a lot of their own standoff weapons, but also on every carrier that's out there, they've got guys that are flying fighters, and they're out, and they've got radar airplanes that are out watching for missiles coming and for other airplanes coming to attack them. So it's one of these things that their defensive systems on the carriers are very, very good. There's the Chinese one. The white lines that you see are basically catapults. And I think what they do with that, although the information has been very skimpy, they launch their vertical lift and takeoff airplanes fully loaded, and they don't launch unless they can put them on the catapult. If you look at I'll show you a picture of the British using vertical lift airplanes. They use a ramp so they can launch that puppy off into the air. I'll talk a little bit about carrier landings. I've got a couple of videos and so forth. Carrier landings, we'll do that, and then look at what else I've got in there. If you look at this, there's a modern U.S. Navy carrier, and you can see you've got launch pads on the bow. You can recover airplanes at the same time you're launching them. So that's quite a neat thing to have. The flight deck itself, what's really important, and I'll show you this, is got right here where they're talking about meatball. What that is, it's a lens system that has a gold colored light in it. The bottom light is red and blinks. Then it's got horizontal lines which are green, and what you're doing is you're flying in so that you line up the middle ball on the lines so that you're landing in, and that gives you a target. The carrier flight deck, and I'll show you a picture of that, they've got 4 wires on the flight deck. Number 1 is nobody's happy if you catch the 1 wire. The target is the 3 wire. And that gives you a pretty decent thing to look at. When you land, you're landing in a Phantom, you're landing at about 136 knots. The wind over the deck is around 28 to 30 knots. So you're actually touching down just over 100 knots. The deceleration, when you pick up a wire, is 4 Gs. Like this. And the first time you forget to lock your seat harness, you do a little bow for everybody. And you bow down. And then after that happens, you learn that if you hadn't locked your seat harness, and you started to bow, you stopped it. You could do it. So. And the center line is the center line, is the center line. There you go, that's what it looks like. What you can't really see very well here is the 4 wires. They're only about 30 feet apart. So your target, when you're coming in, is relatively narrow. If you land more than 6 feet left or right of the center line, they have to strike that cable right off the deck. And so that stops it. And also, if you catch the 1 wire, they're not happy with you, and you're meant to be farther down and so forth. And if you land more than 6 feet left and right, you're in big trouble. So, but it's very accurate, even though you're landing at 136 knots visually. And then you see right along the right side, there's a red line right along the right side, and they park all the airplanes and people and what have you off to the right. And I'll show you what happens if the wire breaks. British contributions, it's a lot. I mean, steam catapults, the angle deck on the Ark Royal. I've got about 100 landings on HMS Ark Royal, flying with the Royal Navy. And Ark Royal was only about 800 feet, just maybe a little bit over 800 feet long. The American carriers are about 1,000 to 1,050 feet long. But the landing area was very small, but it was okay. And then of course you've got the new ones, is the Queen Elizabeth and the Prince of Wales. You've got dual islands, and that's the only carriers around that have 2 islands. You know, and that's the big things that stick up. Gives you an idea. Queen Elizabeth and the Prince of Wales will do about 25, 30 knots, and they carry about 35 airplanes. And they'll have a few helicopters on board as well. Now the flight deck is about 65 feet above the water with no waves. Now that is really moving. Now, if in a second or so, you'll see on the bow, there's a helicopter parked there that they didn't take. There it is. Here's a landing. This is an S3 landing, 2 pilots, and then they've got 2 sitting right behind them. They've got 2 anti-submarine warfare technicians. He's in the left seat, so he's pilot in command, and he's angling around now. And you'll see the carrier pop out in a bit. And you cross over the wake, because the angle decks are about 9 to 10 degrees. Now, it's difficult to see, but the landing light is right about there. And you'll be able to see a bit of that. Now, you can see it, the ball's in the middle. It starts down, turns red, cut to 1 wire. Now, there's a little light right here. Okay? That is very, very real. At night, daytime flying off the carrier is like going to a zoo or a carnival. Nighttime, you are working your bums off, literally. And you can see that. You can see the ball is in the middle there for the most part. Now you can just start to pick up the center line. Ball's in the middle, ball's in the middle, boom. The 3 wire. Here's another landing. It's a late trying to line up. Took the starboard main mount off. Let me see if I can get this to work. There we go. Now watch this guy. On center line. Is it working?
There you go.
There we go.
Coming down hard. Now watch the cable.
Oops.
Cable broke. Watch this. What happens is he settled down to about 20 feet off the water. Ground effect pushes up underneath you. And he had full power on, and he just kept flying the airplane, keeping the wings level. There's no ejection seats in that airplane, so he had it was either in the water or flying. And he flew out and away and kept it all going. Now this, oops, is a Jerry Beaulier special. Oops, go to work. Oh Christ. No, I've lost it. Try it again. Now this is me. It should start all by itself. I haven't been able to get it to go. Colin, you got any ideas?
I thought there was actually.
Let me try my
Hit your set
button
button
here.
again.
Oops.
Right, you're moving on.
Well, I don't understand it. It was working earlier today.
Request permission to land, Jerry, maybe? Not been cleared.
Try it one more time. There we go.
There you go.
Did something. This is me. I got my camera hanging right on the side of my cockpit. Now you can see the balls in the middle.
Yeah.
There it is in the middle, on center line. That's it. Right. Takes me on the Top Gun. Top Gun started in 1989. And the reason for that is they changed the rules of engagement in Vietnam because they'd shot down 2 friendly airplanes. Who they were, I don't know. But they decided that they needed to improve every squadron and get at least one person in each squadron who was a flight instructor that could teach everybody in the squadron how to dogfight. When I came out of Top Gun, I had a dogfight. I had to do a dogfight with every pilot in the squadron at least twice, from the commanding officer on down, and that was really, really good. Some guys you had to fly against 3 or 4 or 5 times before you got them really up to speed where they needed to be. So that was the whole thing for Top Gun. The other things in it, along came Maverick, 1986, and back again in 2022, but there was no Iceman in Top Gun. We were just pilots. My handle was Beau, B-E-A-U, and you went by Beau, and that was it. And the rank, I was a lieutenant at the time. The guys that were teaching us were either lieutenants or lieutenant commanders. And the best pilot they had was the guy who started it, was Dan Pedersen. And if you get my book, if you get the book Top Gun, it was written by Tom Pedersen, or Don Pedersen. And it's very interesting, and it's all straightforward. So, no Iceman. So, basically, the replacement air group was VF 121, and they were training everybody to be fighter pilots, backseat engineers, operators, so forth. And then Top Gun, they organized to put it together. Basically, I didn't know until 45 years after I graduated from it that they'd actually used my dogfight to validate the program. And the Top Gun Association, that's still in existence, at their museum, they've got my video, they show it, and they advertise my name all the time as the first guy. Anyway, I'm just an old guy now, so anyway. Basically, they taught us and it was called fighting the egg, and what we did, we started working the vertical. And for anybody who's never worked the vertical, it's very difficult to keep track of everything that's going on. It's very, very important. But it's very difficult for the bad guy, if he's not looking really good and working with you, he can't keep up with you. And we're doing is we're going from like 10,000 feet to 35, 40,000 feet and back down again. And you're going from negative G at the top to maybe 7 or 8 or whatever. I was known as 8G Jerry. And unfortunately, that all goes back into your back because I had my back done here about a couple of years ago, and the doctor said, after he looked at the MRI, he said, don't let anybody convince you that they can operate on your back. He says, the chances are you'll never walk again because your back is so screwed up. So they've got Top Gun still going on, and I'll work on here real fast. And they moved up to Fallon, Nevada. They've had 4,700 graduates in the 55 years since they started Top Gun. And there's some really, really good, well-known pilots out there. They're fantastic. Talk a little bit about Iran. And again, I have to be careful. The thing is, more than anything, I think that their strategic error to start with is being reflected in all of the shelling that's going on with shelling all the air bases around and then now doing the oil fields and things like that. So they're really hurting the people in Iran, but they're also hurting all the people around as well. And that's the one thing that I have really against the whole thing, is that there's too many innocent people that are there, and there's tourists, there's foreign nationals. Nobody knew any of this was coming. And I don't know how you would have it and not put the word out, but they really needed to empty the country before they closed everything down and all the, the civilians can't get back. And I think now he's talking about Iran is finished. That's not true. They didn't take out, to start with, they didn't take out all of their missiles, all of their drones, and things like that. And then what's going to happen now is it's going to have more damage before they do it. This whole thing, Iran, could very well be against American law, along with other people's law. And it's hard to say, I find it difficult not to talk badly about it. But I try not to because it's pointless. There's nothing I can do until they get rid of the guy who starts his name with a T. Here to give you some idea of what it looks like to launch. Here's the basically what you do is you got it 100%, you salute, he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a guy across the way fires the catapult, and off you go. This is how the Top Gun if you ever get a chance to go out in a fight or do a dog fight, it's absolutely a hoot. I love it. And Henry will tell you too, he's been out there doing the same thing with somebody else, and I loved it. It was just so much fun. And as a test pilot, I've flown 71 different types and kinds of airplanes. And there's about 3 of them that I really loved. One was the Phantom, 2 was the OV-10, which is a twin-engine observation airplane. I just liked going flying it. And I used to do low levels out around the base in Pax River. And the third one is a very old Beaver. It's a tail dragger, sits like this. And I loved flying it. So there's stories with that. So that's me.